We are here back on the Azure YouTube channel with Arnaud from Singapore. I think it's more like a French accent there. And Arnaud,
Well,
welcome.
thanks, Roger.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you here to talk about, all the Terraform on Azure using the new cloud adoption framework, landing zones, and it'll be very nice for people to understand what's going on. And you were doing like a great work on that. It's all yours.
All right, cool. No, so look, very, very nice. Thanks for having me here today and talk about cloud adoption framework and Terraform. So CAF is Microsoft One Voice for cloud adoption, all recommendation, best practices, etc. And a couple of months ago, during Ignite 2019, we announced that we are going to publish guidance not only on first-party technology that you would expect, like we're giving you guidance and best practices for Azure Resource Manager, but we say, okay, we're seeing a bunch of customers that are successful with Azure on Terraform, and we want it to be a little bit more prescriptive on showing and sharing with our customer what we see people successful with Azure, and also or let's say promote a set of good practice and best practice around its adoption. So just very quickly, I can show you how it looks like. Anything you wanna find on CAF is on aka.ms/CAF. So let's just go there, and you'll see that you have all the points where to get started with our cloud adoption. So there is always all the, I would say, preliminary step that as technical people we are probably a little less involved, but that's the strategy, the planification, and then it gets to getting ready, migrating, and innovating. And if we talk about landing zone, basically, it's all about getting an environment ready. So if you go there and you pick in the ready section for first landing zone, well, you have a set of the basic and first party landing zone that we provide, which are basically provided using native technologies, using here example with Blueprint. But as we mentioned, we're giving you also some couple of example on how to use Terraform to build your landing zone. So that's really here to be a little bit more proactive in giving guidance on how to use Terraform to deploy an environment in the landing zone. So if you look here, you see the basics on how do we get started putting the right thing, which is accounting, the taggings, the auditing, the region for the deployment, etc. So there's all the fundamentals of an environment. And if you click here on review the foundations, you'd see that there's actually a little bit more and that. So it's actually the whole GitHub repository. So that's also that, of course, something we wanted to do is since we are using Terraform and we really want to have an open source vision and an open source sharing around this stuff. Because basically, there's nothing secret here. You really want to use standard component, and those standard components, the value they have is really how many times they have been used by many people in the community, how they have been improved between different customer partners, Microsoft employees. So that's pretty much the value that we see there. So that's under Microsoft Azure repository. You can go on github.com/azure/ CAF Terraform Landing Zone, and we'll of course give you the links. But you see here the content of the repository. So basically, you clearly see our goals was to have a set of community samples that we can reuse. And let's say, of course, every customer is different, but if when we go to a customer, let's say we have 70% of a code base which is ready, well, that's already not too bad. Okay, and really we wanted to have a standardization of the way we deploy things on Azure, and that would of course allow to have an accelerated setup of complex environment. Because ultimately, one of the things that we're trying to address with this approach is trying to tackle the complex environment. Simple environment, it's okay. You can find a lot of script available on the internet. But what we're trying to propose here is kind of a methodology and a set of steps to propose enterprise grade approach. So putting all the techniques into the storage of the state, into the DevOps mechanisms, into the standardization of the component to make that uh, basically usable into a big environment. And of course, really, as I mentioned, we wanted to have a community of Azure Terraformer that are based on using the same set of practices, the same set of common shared best practices. Now, if you look at the components that we put behind that, there is of course the landing zone, which is in our organization a set of components put together to deliver a complete solution. So the landing zone is actually the service composition ultimate block. It's the most complex. It's putting all of the bits together. And out of that, on the other side, the most elementary stuff is what we call the modules. And the modules is usually basically deploying a technical component on Azure, but adding some added value or enforcing some best practices in the way we leverage the component. And you know, here it might be sometimes tedious to see, but what's the advantage of a module using the native provider from Terraform? Well, usually what we say is adding some value, accelerating the delivery of an architecture building block, or enforcing some common behavior that we want to happen all the time. Let's say, for instance, we never deploy a VNet just for a VNet because that wouldn't make any sense. It would be really much better to use the provider from Azure RM, the native provider. But what we do is we have a virtual network module. And when you use this module, automatically we create the module, the VNet, the NSG, the network flow logs, the traffic analytics that goes with it, enforcing the network security group, all of those elements that you do individually. You can do this individually, but it takes time. It takes time to integrate, to validate the way they operate together. But once it's in the module that we provide, then you already know that all of those services are provided. So that's a bit those level of decomposition. The modules on one side, the landing zone on the other side, and in between, within the landing zone, we have a concept that we call a blueprint, which is, let's say, a set of modules that deliver a service, but that could be reused across landing zone.
I
So
know.
that's, yeah.
I have a quick question there. I think it's great.
Sure.
You know, you can see the land zone modules and blueprints, and even have a custom provider there.
Yep.
How you said that on GitHub is open source. How the community can help on that? How we can, you have modules. There is a bunch of people using and companies using these, and they are collaborating. How that process works?
Yep. So look, very simple here. First, we decided to publish all the modules on the registry first, because I think it's quite important to standardize the elements. So if you go to the Terraform registry and you look for CAF, then you will see some of those modules. So I was talking about virtual network. Let's see if we can find it in this list here. Virtual network, it's here. So you see this one has been used 9,000 times. So it's already not too bad. And you see it's almost 10,000, and you see it's a verified. So we have the verification process with Hashicorp. So ultimately, why we did the registry is a couple of reasons. One of the main technical reasons, because it enforces everyone to use a strong semantic versioning. And I think this is really important aspect. It's because really we want to have people use versions and not use latest, which is not possible via the registry. But ultimately, the module, as you mentioned, it's all on GitHub. So if I click on this link, you go. I'm going back to GitHub to this time a slightly different repo. And on this repo, you see that we're having here the modules for virtual network with all of its feature and description. So on how to collaborate, a question is actually very simple. Here you have an issue. Well, good. You open an issue. Then we do the triage with the team, and then we determine if this is something that we want to address first party within the main contributors community, or if someone wants to take the lead on it. That's totally fine. And we're taking PR. So same thing. We're taking the PR. We're evaluating with our code practice if it match the things that we want to do, what could be the impact on the other environment, and ultimately it's validated by test. So for now, on this particular module, it's still manual, but you see that some of the module we're adding progressively all the CI for individual unit test and also integration test. So point is simple: community based driven, something that we bring from our end, something that we see customer opening issues and PR, same thing partners opening issue and PR. That's really our collaboration model. As we mentioned, we want to
Yeah.
take all the community and make something that is greater for everyone.
I could say that's great. That's really great because that's what we want. We want people collaborating, and we have 10,000 already using a VM. That's a good number, and it's growing a lot every single day. And I would say the preference is just go and use the registry one, because you make sure that you can keep updating the version. If you copy the code, then means that you maybe have to maintain that yourself.
Mhm.
And then I would say recommend to follow the registry as maximum that you can. And
Yeah, and look, I would say maximum as possible use
that's
the public module, right? But sometimes when we start the work with enterprise with a company, their DevOps group, they just fork the module from the repository you see here, and then it keeps them the history of the upstream. So they can make their environment, and they can say, well, we have this great feature, so you can PR back to us, or the other way around. You say maybe they fork it initially, they thought they could do something, but they realize that actually the module has evolved in the public with new feature, so they can evaluate if it's okay for them, if it's easy to integrate, and same thing, they can resync with the upstream the module, and that's totally fine.
that's a good point. And how they can use that? Can I have a single lane zone that we can show for them and see how they can start using that?
Well, first I'm going to do you a GitHub demo on how it looks, and
Yeah.
then probably in a couple of minutes I can do a demo within the environment. Okay.
Okay, great.
Cool. So I'm just gonna show you quickly, some of the landing zones that we have. We provide you with a couple of sample landing zones, and really the idea is that you're able to get started. For instance, the one I was mentioning before, the foundations, which is one of the things that you need to do on a subscription before you're able to do anything. So all the things related to accounting, security, and governance, you see that we have all these elementary bits put on this first landing zone. So you can say all the diagnostics login, all the log analytics and the log analytics solution, and then all the activity logs that are either on Azure Monitor or in the activity log storage account or even Hub. That's also what we deploy, and also the policies and the security center and or Sentinel. So if we look at the landing zone experience, what really we try to do is put maximum usage of variables and toggle features. Meaning that if you don't want to go into the code, you're able to get started without doing too much thing. And if you look at this example, all of the landing zones we have auto TF-vars. So automatically, those variables will be interpolated with our Terraform variables. And it really enables you to get started fast. And let's say, you know what, I want to deploy into this region in Southeast Asia. I want to use this naming convention. We're having a 1, 2, 3, 4 naming convention that we support by default. So if I change this value, automatically it will take, for instance, CAF random or CAF classic. CAF classic is the exact recommendation that you find on the web page. So if you go to a cloud adoption framework naming convention, that's exactly what you have that. So
Awesome.
every name that you type. So let's say, sometimes we test and we do test account.
Yep,
Before we just create the test account, for instance, we just say, okay, it's a resource group. So based on CAF recommendation, it should be RG dash and then the name. And then we verify if it's the right size, if it's not too long, if the right set of characters are in it or not. That's pretty much what we do with the naming convention.
that's great.
And then you see we're enforcing here a set of tags, a set of resource group. And as we mentioned, you want to deploy the activity logs. You just say, okay, I want to keep it for 1 year. I don't need to store the events into Event Hub. I'm not, for instance, sending those events to a CM solution. And here, same thing, a set of settings, a set of stuff like I want to use Security Center standard, yes or no. If I don't, it's okay. And if I type yes, true, then automatically it's gonna include the standard SKU on my subscription. And then with the phone contacts that you see here, you'll start receiving the alerts. So that's pretty much the experience that we're trying to do. And then in the code, you see that, of course, we implement the realization of those toggle features. So if we look at Sentinel, for instance, ultimately Sentinel is just, okay, if I see the variable Sentinel equal to 1, then I will enable this plan into the code. So that's what we try to do, is simple implementation, all based on toggle feature that you can enable stuff quite fast.
Yeah. And there is a new feature coming on the new next version of Terraform that's going to allow, we call modules in for each loops and things that we're going to bring new ways to do things there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's coming in a couple of weeks, Terraform 13, and yes, it's been long awaited by the community. I think the loops on the module, the conditional on the module, and the depends on the module. That's so actually we are starting the work now to have that implemented. And since we're talking about that, we are using the uh, Terraform provider as provider for the naming convention. Same thing in to Terraform 1.3. Then we have the possibility to dynamically provision the provider from the registry as well. So we don't have to carry too much work around what do I put my provider with my binaries here. Direct provisioning of the registry for third-party providers. So that's something also we're working on.
That's great. And I noticed that this repo is inside the Azure Microsoft repo,
Correct,
and
correct. And we're
and
getting
and the modules are in a different repo, but just for people to understand, that's fine. That's already verified as well as a partner on the registry. And I think that's a new thing, by the way. Congratulations for the team to having this done, and I think it was great to be a verified module and to have the landing zones inside the Azure repo as well.
thanks. Yeah, and look, we're on the Azure registry for the landing zone with 99 stars. So we're 1 star away to reach our first 100. So guys tuning in, please star the repo. And yeah, you mentioned the modules are actually stored into another repo or another organization, just because it's easier for us to manage all the modules independently, and that's much easier to have this into one organization instead of everything under Azure. So that's just convenience for us.
Yep. I think that's a great introduction. I think I'm happy for us to break here. Maybe we do a second part with like a more developer tools, and I know that you guys have some very interesting way to manage the inner source development cycle,
Yep.
and then we can come back with another part two of this. And is there anything else you wanna summarize what you just showed for us and what's coming next?
What I want to summarize is have a look at documentation. There's a lot of things explaining our enterprise adoption on it. So how do you create multiple layers, complex environment, full loads of details there. So have a look there. Too short to summarize, but go there. And as usual, remember it's community based. So if you have something you're not sure about, so something you want to have an opinion or proposing a feature, you just go to issues and just open an issue. And we're happily taking a PR as well inside both environment that I showed you. So super happy you see the features appearing here and the issues coming up. So
That's great. I think
yep.
that's a great introduction, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me here.